The president of the company, my wife, was pressuring me to choose between divorce and imprisonment. Thinking about the tragic fate of the original wife, I quickly picked up the pen and signed my name on the divorce agreement. The female president's face instantly darkened as she said, "Alexander, are you sure you've thought this through?" My heart skipped a beat and I quickly covered my wallet, joking, "I am not giving back a single penny of that $1 million alimony." After staying up all night, I died suddenly and found myself reincarnated as a male supporting character in a novel. When I woke up, I discovered I was locked in a basement. The original character's name was Alexander, who took advantage of his family's wealth to act recklessly. 3 years ago, he fell head over heels for Allison, a part-time worker at a club. But Allison didn't reciprocate his feelings. Desperate, Alexander resorted to threatening her mother's medical expenses, forcing her to marry him. For 3 years of marriage, they were unhappy. No matter what Alexander did, Allison never loved him. Her heart belonged to her childhood sweetheart, Jack, and Alexander often lost his mind with jealousy. While Alexander was losing his senses in love, Allison sought to become a new powerhouse in the business world. While Alexander fell into poverty due to his family's bankruptcy. His father committed suicide by jumping off a building, and his mother lay critically ill in the hospital. A couple of days ago, out of jealousy over Allison giving Jack a birthday present, Alexander drove and injured Jack. In a fit of rage, Allison locked him up in the basement, denying him food and water. Just when I thought I was about to die, Allison finally appeared, throwing a divorce agreement at me and saying condescendingly, "Alexander, Jack is badly injured. If he pursues legal action, you'll face criminal charges." My eyelids flickered. I had only just survived. I didn't want to go to jail. Picking up the agreement, my eyes lit up instantly. After the divorce, I could receive $1 million in alimony and a villa in the city. Finally, my turn for immense wealth had arrived. I have to say, the female president sure knew how to spend money. Suppressing my excitement, I quickly picked up the pen to sign, but to my dismay, the ink cartridge was broken, and no ink came out. Panicking, I bit my finger and used my blood to sign. Handing it to her, I asked, "When will the alimony be transferred?" Allison was taken aback. "Alexander, are you sure you've thought this through?" She hadn't expected me to agree so readily, considering how I always cried, threw tantrums, and threatened suicide whenever she mentioned divorce. Before then I bit my lip hard, afraid she would see the corners of my mouth twitching upwards. In the ensuing silence, I closed my eyes. I had almost starved to death these past 2 days and had thought a lot. Rather than making you hate me, I might as well set you free. After agreeing to the divorce, Allison released me from the basement. Fearing that the agreement signed in blood might be invalidated, I went outside to have it reprinted and signed again. As I prepared to give it to Allison, I noticed her solemn expression as she talked on the phone. I quickly approached her. After hanging up, she grabbed my arm and said, "Come with me to the hospital." Only when we arrived at the hospital did I realize that Jack had hemophilia and urgently needed a blood transfusion. My blood type happened to be a match, and Allison wanted me to donate blood to Jack. I cursed inwardly. I've always been afraid of needles, and donating 400毫升 of blood at once I didn't know how long it would take to replenish. So, I asked tentatively, "Can I not donate blood?" Allison's face was filled with disgust and impatience. "If you hadn't driven and injured Jack, he wouldn't be lying here on the brink of death." She firmly held my arm, her gaze burning into me, as if she wanted to skin me alive. "You donating whether you like it or not." And just like that, 400毫升 of my blood was drained, leaving me weak and almost fainting. Allison didn't even glance at me, her thoughts were solely on Jack. I felt a twinge of disappointment. No matter what, I had always loved Allison deeply, indulging her every whim and pouring out my heart to her, only to be nothing more than an annoyance in her eyes. Anyone would feel heartbroken. However, the thought of the upcoming $1 million alimony made me push those feelings aside. What was a little blood compared to that kind of money? As I left the hospital, I put out my phone, and stumbled upon the trending topic about me and Jack. Jack, Allison's childhood friend, had been turned into a top celebrity last year thanks to Allison's financial support. Meanwhile, I was being mercilessly bashed online for driving, and injuring Jack in a fit of jealousy. The netizens' insults didn't bother me. As long as the money was right, they could throw rotten eggs at me, just not on my handsome face. Then at this point, I started considering live streaming to capitalize on my current popularity. I remembered that Allison's company owned an advertising and media arm, so I tentatively called her, but she rejected me outright. "We're not divorced yet." I won't let you live stream and embarrass me. Heartbroken, I returned home, or rather, Allison's home. After my bankruptcy, the mansion I used to live in was auctioned off, and this villa now belonged to Allison. She could kick me out at any time. Then, as I wandered around, I noticed that Allison loved buying jewelry, each piece invaluable. Many of them were gifts I had given her before. I thought about taking a couple without her noticing. After all, she had so many. Somehow, news of my divorce with Allison reached her grandmother's ears, and she flew into a rage, firmly opposing our divorce. After Allison's rise to success, she wanted to bring her grandmother to live in the mansion with her, but her grandmother preferred staying in the old house, saying that one shouldn't forget one's roots. When Grandma saw me, her face lit up with wrinkles and joy. In the past, to please Allison, I had been filial to her grandmother, and she often came over to chat and brought her various supplements. As a result, she had come to consider me her grandson-in-law. Grandma looked at me with a smile and said, "Alexander, don't worry. I won't agree to Allison marrying that Jack. Not unless I am dead. They can forget about it." Allison and Jack were childhood sweethearts, but Grandma had never liked Jack, thinking she was a snob at heart. Allison was helpless but didn't dare say anything. I took Grandma's dry hand and said, "Grandma, don't say such unlucky things. You live a long and healthy life." Grandma's smile broadened. "It's Allison's fortune to marry you. Without me, Allison wouldn't be the renowned figure in the business world today. Her success is half due to me. Giving you our $1 million in alimony is only fair." Seeing how happy I made Grandma, Allison's mood became complicated. On the way back, she warned me, "I'll convince Grandma in the next few days. The divorce won't change. Don't try to backtrack." "Are you kidding? I'd have to be brain dead to backtrack for our $1 million. I nodded vigorously. Allison was surprised by my attitude, not expecting me to be so agreeable. She glared at me and said, "Don't play any mind games with me." The next morning, I received a call from the hospital saying my mother's surgery could be scheduled, but the medical fees had to be paid within 3 days. I hadn't received the alimony yet, and 20 万 wasn't enough. If I couldn't raise the money, my mother would die. I had no choice but to go to Allison for more. Allison was at the hospital taking care of Jack when I rushed in, panting, "Allison, transfer me another 30 万." Allison didn't utter a word, just sitting quietly on the hospital bed. Jack glared at me with anger and hatred in his eyes. I knew he would have throttled me if Allison weren't there. Since becoming famous, Jack had earned a decent living, but without Allison, he would still be a mechanic. Allison was expressionless, not stopping him because the original Alexander had once humiliated Jack when he was just a mechanic. Alexander, jealous of Jack's love for Allison, had always caused trouble for him, even going so far as to force him to kneel and pay him money for repairing his cars. Jack looked at me provocatively and said, "What's the matter? Don't you want the money? That's a striptease, and I'll give you 200,000." Before Jack could finish his sentence, I had already stripped down to my underwear and started toiling, afraid he would change his mind. Allison was stunned, and Jack was dumbfounded. Although I was a spoiled playboy, a young master would never bow down, let alone dance a striptease. It was an absolute insult. Allison frowned at me, her eyes full of disgust. I secretly pinched my thigh, forcing out 2 tears, and choked. "My mother is waiting for the surgery money to save her life. I don't want to do this, but he's offering too much." I looked up at Allison with red-rimmed eyes, and said, "Should I dance to stripteases for you too, for old time's sake? I'll give you a discount, just 30 万 will do." Allison was furious, her eyes red as she said, "Put your clothes on and take the money. Now leave." I finally got the 400,000 and was thrown out of the hospital by Allison's people. I lay on the ground to rest for a while since I had strained my back while dancing. Before long, a shadow fell over me, and I looked up to see my archenemy, Lucas. Then the reason for our friction was simple. At an auction, I bid against Lucas for a ruby necklace to give to Allison, and of course, with my wealth, I won it at a price 3 times higher than his. Since then, we had always been at loggerheads, neither willing to back down. He mocked me for being a lapdog, and I mocked him for being single.